right, awesome. So like Heather said, my name is Lauren Rubash. I work at Gateway High School, and we're going to talk about creating and using HyperDocs today. I'm going to kind of keep my slide presentation in this format to just kind of show you better how these slideshows actually work, because when your kids actually use them, they'll be using them kind of in like the edit mode and not really the present mode. So it'll just be kind of easier than to toggle back and forth. So I do teach 9th grade world history. Prior to this, I actually spent 3 years in Virginia teaching 8th grade English as well. So I kind of have both of those backgrounds, kind of see both of those things today play out. But you can use HyperDocs for any of your grade levels, any of your subjects. So it works out well. As far as online learning goes at Gateway, we've been doing asynchronous learning, and we've been using Google Classroom. So if you did sit on that other session, I gave lots of tips for using Google Classroom as well. And today, I have lots of examples to show you. I want to give you all the ideas that I can on how you can use these HyperDocs, because there's just so many options. I mean, whatever you can think of, whatever you need to use for your classroom, whatever works for you, you can make happen in a HyperDoc. You just kind of have to think about it a little bit. So I'm hoping that I can kind of spark your imagination, I guess, and allow you to kind of get started using HyperDocs. And then I'm going to go over some tips on how to create them and things that I do to make sure that they work well once your students get a hold of them. So the first thing I want to show you is my digital bell ringers. I created these for my English classroom. I had a set of Chromebooks in my classroom, so they were able to come into the classroom, get on their assigned Chromebook, pull these up. I would post them weekly, and they could just work on each one as the day went on. So this is, I'm just going to kind of quickly go through some of these. A lot of creating HyperDocs is just kind of creating boxes and boxes for them to read things and to type things. So here we're talking about roots and affixes every week. So I would switch out the root of the affix. They would write a sentence. They will be able to click in these boxes and type those sentences. Wherever it says type here, they know that they have to click and they have to type something. Tuesday would be Twitter Tuesday. I love to try to take the HyperDocs and make them relatable to them in some sort of way. So in English, it was pretty easy to do that. We were able to use these very interestingly written tweets by their favorite celebrities and kind of correct their grammar. So they were able to, again, type in the box. We were able to have a class discussion then. Hey, we need to capitalize this, we need to use this punctuation here, these quotations here, whatever it might be. And I really saw a lot of improvement over the year from just doing these bell ringers. This was another grammar opportunity for them. They were able to drag and drop. If it was a simple sentence, they would drag and drop it over here. This was all their parts of speech down below. So they would have a sentence every week from a book. They were able to drag and drop these above the words, make copies of them if we needed more than one, all of that. So that was another way you could do some drag and drop things with HyperDocs. Again, this is another super simple one. They were writing hooks or they were writing thesis statements, depending on the week, to a prompt that I just put in a text box and made it look pretty. And then they could type in this box here below. This is just one of my kids' examples of their hook. Free Write Friday, all I did was just insert a picture and again, insert a box for them to type in. I got some really awesome stories from this because I would just give them like a super random picture and they had to imagine and write what was happening. So that's a super easy way to get them writing creatively. I know that's not always an option with our curriculums as far as creative writing goes, but this allowed them to do that as well. Moving on from bell ringers, another activity you could use is a meme creating. Everybody loves a good meme. This one was for when we read The Outsiders. So spoiler alert, Johnny dies. Okay, and they were able to insert a picture, insert their text, and then this is what it would kind of look like on the other end. So when one of your favorite characters in the book dies, that's their reaction. So that's a super easy one that you can insert into any HyperDoc if they're reacting to a story, if they're reacting to a video, an article, whatever it might be, you could have them create a meme, because I think they're all pretty good at that too. This is a more recent one from my virtual learning kind of journey, I guess. This was creating kind of a faux Instagram page for some of these historical characters. And I do have, at the end, I have a link to some templates that I made for you guys that will be linked to my one pager on the AIU site where you guys signed up. And there's a link in this presentation as well. And this is one of the templates that I'm giving you. So I gave them directions on the side. So that's the other thing, is that when you have these HyperDocs, you can put things around the slide to help them. I like to put directions. These are just kind of screenshots that I took and cut down for them to tell them how do they insert the images, how do they crop the images to a square, how do they create the image for the circle for their profile picture. So they were able to do that. They were able to make a username, their profile here, and then 6 obviously relevant pictures as well. And I always they had to read this article, so this is a link that they would click on and open up. And I always put like the little arrow if there's directions on the side for them, so they know that they're there. The other thing you can do, and I'll show you this on the next page, this link doesn't work anymore just because I took it from another presentation. But if you click on this, it would bring up the slide and they could go back to my activity board. I would give them an activity board each week to kind of let them know what activities were in the HyperDoc. So that would kind of look like this. So you can make this a choice board. I've seen people make choice boards where they have 6 different things or they have 9 different things, and it's like, hey, choose 3. And they maybe put those directions on the sides, wherever it might be. And the kids would have to complete so many of the choices. Mine was an activity board because they had to do all of them. So they were able to click on this. And again, this is deleted, but they would be able to go to that. It would take them directly to that slide. So if they were ever kind of confused on what they needed to do. And how you do that is if you just click on this, you would click on the insert link button, and then it gives you an option to edit the link. And when you do that, you can either obviously type in like a link to the internet, or you have this option, slides in this, why does it like me today? Slides in this presentation, there we go. And you could pick whatever slide you want in this presentation, and it would link it. When you click on it, it would take you there. So that's another option as well. You can do slides within slides to take them to certain places you want to. Another HyperDoc slide that I would use is the bracket. Everybody loves a good bracket. We didn't really have March Madness this year, so this was my March Madness. We were talking about the Middle Ages, the inventions in the Middle Ages. Again, it gave them a link, right? Kind of gave them directions, read this first. They were able to click on the link, open that up, read, and then they were able to drag and drop these as well. So I kept them all on the sides, gave them multiples in case that was their winner. And then they were able to just drag and drop these. Now, how did I make these? You could use just regular text boxes to make these, or I typed them on here and then I took screenshots and just cropped them down so that all that was left was the words. And then you just make copies of them. And again, this is just inserting lines, inserting boxes, inserting text boxes. I know it might look a little crazy, but I promise it's easy once you play around with it. This is another one from the same HyperDoc. Again, still talking about the Middle Ages. So we were talking about Gothic architecture. So I found this awesome picture of the cathedral that was kind of opened up. And since we were talking about all the different features of Gothic architecture, you could use this like in science or something if you're labeling something. A cell even just kind of comes to my mind, the different parts and pieces. I just took then pictures of those features and I just cropped them into a circle. So when you click on this, you're able to crop it and give it a shape. And then they could click and drag all of these. So these were all on the side over here. with directions, and then they would just click and drag all these boxes onto the black boxes wherever they belonged. So that was really cool. Going back to kind of some English things, book snaps, kind of like Snapchat, but I say it's with the filter because it's controlled in a controlled environment. Basically, they could use their laptop, they could use an iPad, they could even use a cell phone to take pictures of part of a text or an entire text, whatever it is. They would insert that picture into the template, which I'll show you on the next slide. And then they can kind of add their reactions, my kids created a Bitmoji. If your kids are 13 or over, they can create a Bitmoji account. And it's a Google Chrome extension that I talked about in my other session. We created our own Bitmojis. If they're not 13, you could just create your Bitmoji and insert pictures on the sides of your Bitmojis, different ones that they're allowed to use. We did have to have the conversation that there are some Bitmojis that are inappropriate, but my kids are able to handle it. So you could add Bitmojis, thought bubbles, arrows. They could underline words and sentences or highlight them. And the ones that I'm going to show you are from, we were reading Telltale Heart. So we were learning about mood and tone through that story. So they were able to go in and do some underlining, add their Bitmoji, add their reaction. And this was kind of the template that I gave them. This template will also be available in the Google slide templates that I'm giving you guys too. So this will be in there. This is just another one, right? So she put a pink box around the part of the story she was referring to. She added her Bitmoji, she added a thought bubble. So it's just kind of a cool way to get them, again, they're using something that's relevant to them, but in a school way, and they're learning and showing you what they've learned. So I enjoy book snaps as well. This is just some more simple stuff. So this was one of my covers for, again, it doesn't have to be crazy. Sometimes I have them be able to type their name in here. And this is just some slides from that HyperDocs. So you could have them looking at just 2 pictures, typing in a box here, right? And then to get them actually communicating outside of just, this is their HyperDoc with their answers, especially now since we're virtual learning. I made this before virtual learning, but this is great. There's a website called Padlet, and it's free. And you can go on, and it's basically almost like a virtual like message board where you just see my answer there, but the kids would type their answers down here. They could add pictures, they could add links, and they would post them. And I would have them then respond to 2 other classmates' posts as well. So it's kind of like almost like a silent discussion. In this case, it's the only type of discussion we can have. So this is a great way to kind of get that interaction between classmates so that they're not just doing their own work. So you can use Padlet. On this slide, again, they're reading an excerpt from a primary source, and then they're answering questions. Again, just some boxes, adding text boxes. Here, they were voting in a poll. So there's this website called Mentimeter, and I have a list of all of these at the end to show you guys as well. But you could do Mentimeter, they can vote yes or no, and you can also give them a link to actually even see the results. It's tired. Yeah, so there's the question, and then there's the results. So that's kind of a cool way, again, to kind of get them involved and communicating either with their classmates or with you. This is a timeline. I've used a couple different timelines that I've made, but this one, again, they're just able to drag and drop these wherever they belong. I don't know if these are right, but they're able to drag and drop those as well. Again, timelines can kind of work for a lot of different subjects, grade levels as well. They can also click and drag for maps. So if you put a map in the background, this is kind of a review map for the most part for our kids. And I did give them reference maps. Again, I took maps and just put them on slides at the end of the slideshow. So they would be able to normally click on this slide. It would take them to a slide within the slideshow for a reference map. And then there was also a link to their textbook because there was a map in their textbook they could use. And then there's that back to the activity board slide again, or link again, so they could go back if they needed help. So they would just be able to drag and drop all of these as well. I kind of kept them all down here in the bottom corner, and then they had to move them. This was a poem when we were learning about Edgar Allan Poe. You could do it. So you could do a poem. They just had to follow these directions. So they had to read the poem. They had to take these circles, which we already made for them, and then just drag and drop them over 3 examples of alliteration. Oh, your students forgot what alliteration is? What a surprise. So you can just add a link to a YouTube video that we found when I was teaching English that kind of reiterated what alliteration was. So they were able to, without having to come to you and ask you for help, they were able to kind of problem solve on their own, figure out what alliteration is. And then they also had to highlight in orange 3 words that they didn't know. So they drag and drop these. And then again, just some text boxes that they were able to fill in. And then we were talking about themes, so they answered a question about theme. Super easy. This one is one of my favorites. It's kind of like the virtual refrigerator magnets. And they got to drag and drop all of these different words or create their own words and drag and drop to make kind of their own type of poem. So that was fun for them, something a little bit different. Again, we were talking about Edgar Allan Poe, we're talking about tone and mood, so they were able to kind of create a creepy Poe-esque poem. This is just, again, simple drag and drop. They don't have to be as elaborate as some of mine. I've been doing this for a few years now, so I'm getting more creative and more extra, as I like to say. So this is a simple one, reviewing types of text structure. They click on these text boxes that I created. These are just text boxes. I created a table over here, and they can just, you know, click and drag them. That's super easy. This was also text structure. I added this little passage. They had to, in the box below, type the type of text structure here. I gave them 3 circles. They had to circle clue words that gave them the clues for type of text structure. And then even just a little vocabulary throw in there, write a definition for the word Tinder. Okay, so that was super easy. Something else that I know I've seen on paper that people do, these kind of word webs for vocabulary. So I decided to do them digitally. We did this for the outsiders. So I gave them this slide first. Those are the direction slide. And then this would be what a slide would look like filled in. So I just made, again, boxes where they could type in the boxes. They could add words to the boxes. Nothing super crazy. Cause and effect, to do that, I had them use this website called Storyboard That. Right now, I believe, I know you can get a free demo, but I think it's a lot longer right now just because of all this stuff that's happening. But normally you do have to pay for it, but it's called Storyboard That. And some of these kids really like it. It's digital storytelling. I'm not sure if it says, I know you can get a 14-day trial, but I think it's longer right now, actually. So basically what happens is they are able to create like a digital comic in a way. This was for cause and effect. So this was outsiders again, Johnny and Pony Boy, not careful with their cigarettes, the church catches on fire. What happens after that, right? So they were able to do that as well. You could do any like historical event that happened. You could do cause and effect. Trying to think what else I've done. But you could do all sorts of different things that you want them to animate as well. Another thing you could do is a collaborative slide discussion. So normally all of these HyperDocs, when I post them in Google Classroom, I choose that option that says make a copy for each student. You could do this a different way too, where you have them able to edit each of the slide, like one slideshow, and each of them have their own slide. It's labeled with their name within one slideshow. So they got these directions. They had to find the slide with their name at the top, and they had to answer the question in complete sentences. Then they had to find a peer slide that didn't have a comment on it, and they had to add comments, whether you agree, you disagree, more text evidence, and insert a picture or symbol as well on their slide that accurately portrayed the theme. So this is just an example of kind of what that looked like. So this was Jaylyn. She typed her answer. She had her her picture, and then you can see on the side that two of her classmates used the comment feature in Google and actually commented some reactions and some agreeing and disagreeing on what they thought about her answer. So you could use Google Slides that way as well, which is really cool. This is another simple one. I made a plot diagram. I made it, the colors pretty. They can just drag and drop all these boxes down here up into the boxes up here. So you could make, this is just, you know, general definitions. You could make it the actual parts of a story that the kids would have to put in order. You could make them type the parts in there and not give them to them. Just depends on how you want to do it. This was actually a project that our kids did this year, the Virtual Roman Republic Museum. We learned about the Roman Republic and all of the kind of political rules during that time. So they were able to do this, and here's one that works. This is the next slide. So they were able to click on this, and this took them to the lobby. All I did here was just I Googled pictures of museum lobbies, and I just added these arrows. So all of these arrows then have links to the various slides, the various rooms. So this one would take you, and this would be room 1. Now the kids would insert pictures in this box in the middle, and then you could click on exhibit 1, and it would take you to where they would type their paragraph all about that political role, what they did, what they were responsible for, what kind of powers they had, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So you could kind of do this with anything. I mean, you could change this background to make it less history and more something else. But yeah, using a virtual museum, they turned out pretty well. I liked them, they were fun. Now I'm gonna get into some how-tos. How did I do all of these things? The main thing would definitely be that I learned this mistake over the years is that you have to make your backgrounds still. So the backgrounds can't move. So when I'm creating these, a lot of times I'm creating in PowerPoint and uploading them to Google Slides. You can make everything in Google Slides. It doesn't really matter. But basically I create everything on the slide that I know that I don't want them to move or edit. So any text, any picture I don't want them to move, any boxes I don't want them to move. So I create all of those. Then I go to File, Download, and you can download it as a PNG. If you're working in PowerPoint, you can do the same thing, but you're doing Save, Save As, and then instead of a PowerPoint, you can hit the little drop-down arrow and you'll have PNG as an option, and you can actually save all of them at the same time. You don't have to go individually, which is nice. But you download that as a PNG image, throw it in your Google Drive into whatever folder you're working out of. And then for each slide that you're then creating, you would add that PNG file that you saved, all those, that text, those boxes, those pictures that you don't want to move. Now they're going to be a picture, and you would just go to change background, choose image, choose that picture, and then it'll pop in your slide and you won't be able to move it. So like this one, like I can't, that's not a good example because that one you can move. Let me find you on, some of these are screenshots. So like this one, I can't click on any of this text. I saved it all as a background, but I can click on these boxes and this text. So this is what the kids could move. So you just do that by creating those still backgrounds. Because if you don't create still backgrounds, things get crazy. Kids are like sliding pictures off your screen. It's all happened to me. So I've learned from that mistake. But yeah, here's just the more directions for inserting that as a background. That's like my number one thing. If you take away anything else from this, keep still backgrounds. Here's those add-ons that I was talking about. These are all links that you guys can click on and kind of play around with. I showed you the Mentimeter where you can create interactive questions, polls, even quick quizzes you can create and insert in here. So if you want them to take a quick little quiz, you can use Google Forms or you can use Mentimeter if you want to switch it up. I showed you Padlet. Obviously, I talked about inserting YouTube videos. YouTube videos are great during this time, especially for me, because as a history teacher at this point, I'm not lecturing at all. So they really are just reading things. So videos have been great. And I try to find like short videos, like maximum like 5 to 7 minutes, try to stay underneath that just to keep their attention. Storyboard that. I showed you creating those digital storyboards and comic strips. They could use Flipgrid. You can interact Flipgrid or intertwine Flipgrid with your HyperDoc as well. And then you could also even use Edpuzzle in there. You could put a link to Edpuzzle. Basically, you take a video, you can add voice narration, you can add comprehension check questions where they have to stop and answer the question before they can continue watching the video. So you can add in links to all sorts of things. And these are just some of the activities that I talked about. So they can create a meme, they can analyze maps, they can annotate text, they can create those drag and drop scenarios that I was talking about. And then, like I said, they can link slides within slides. Instead of linking to a HyperDoc, you can just link further down in the slideshow if you want them to go to a certain slide as well. Creating text boxes in drag and drop. So if you're having trouble, you don't know how to do this, or at least how to make it work well for the students. So when you're adding a text box on top of that still background, you want to put a border around the text box and or change the background color, just make it stand out and not just blend in with the background so that the kids know that it's there. You also want to type the words type here so the kids know where to type, because you could create a text box and it'll be there, but the kids won't really see it unless they click on it. So making it look different, making it stand out, and actually typing the words type here, they know that they can go back and delete those words and type their answer right there. That's kind of the easiest way to do that, because you will also have kids who will delete text boxes accidentally, things of that nature. So you kind of also have to give them some help as well, because a lot of times they've never used Google Slides or PowerPoint in this way before. They're used to just making presentations. So you might have to give them some help with like how to undo mistakes, you know, use the undo button, where to create a new text box if they deleted a text box, those types of things as well. Creating the drag and drop activities. So you would just create a box where you want each piece to be dropped, essentially where it belongs. And then creating the items or the words that you want to be dragged. Again, I would change the background color. I would add a border to it just so it stands out, so you know that you're doing your drag and drop. And then don't forget to add your drag and drop items after you make that still background, because if you make everything on the slide, including the drag and drop pieces, and you save it all as a PNG, you won't be able to move those pieces anymore. So kind of like this one, which ironically is Michael Jordan, if anybody else has been watching that. So this was a fact and opinion one. It's already done, but basically all these pieces were over here. Oops, I'm moving the whole box for you guys. All these pieces were over here. See, that's what happens. And they were able to drag and drop them. Now you can't, I can click on this picture because I took this picture of a slide, but you can't click on the directions. You can't click on Monday. You can't click on fact or opinion. You can't move Michael Jordan. You can only move these boxes. I don't remember where they were, but they were here. So that's kind of an example of the drag and drop again. Last thing, if you don't know how to upload it to Google Classroom to make sure all your kids have their own individual HyperDoc to complete and submit to you, create assignment, find it in your Google Drive, wherever you saved it, in all those magic folders. And then you wanna change the option at the bottom there. When you see the file pop up, you have three options. Students can view the file, which means they can't edit it. Students can edit the file, which means all your students are editing one slideshow, which will not end well. Made that mistake. And then the last one is the one you want, the make a copy for each student. That's like the golden ticket. That way you can actually, in Google Classroom, then see them as they're working on their assignment. You can click on any of their assignments, see their progress. I used to do that a lot, just kind of creep through to make sure they're getting their work done. And then, or if they need help with something, that way you can kind of go in and help them as well. And then you have those individual slideshows to grade. Somebody asked me in the last session too about how I go about grading these things. Depending on the activity, if it's like a drag and drop or like a map, something that's a little bit more like you have to do the whole thing for it to make sense. I try to do like 5 points for that slide. And then if there's ones that are just questions, I try to do it like 1 point a question. So they end up getting a grade if you're still taking grades. But the last thing is don't reinvent the wheel. I'm gonna give you templates. to kind of get you started and get you kind of thinking and creating. But there's also this website called HyperDocs.co. And there's a bunch of different examples. There's a bunch of different templates for different grades, different subjects. Don't reinvent the wheel. You could take those HyperDocs and kind of mold them and create them for what you need, what works for you, what works for your kids. But kind of the sky's the limit. You have lots of different options for HyperDocs. So with that being said, I have time for lots of questions.
Okay, thank you so much. Great,
You're welcome.
really good feedback in the chat. You probably haven't been monitoring it.
Nope.
Really good feedback. Lots of people who are excited to use some of these things. So, well, I really only wrote down about 4 questions.
Okay.
But anybody else who has questions, please keep adding them to the chat, and we'll bring them in. The first question was, can you provide a copy of the bell ringers? But then we had a follow-up from that. It looked like you might have found them on TPT.
Yes. So
Okay.
I do sell things on Teacher Pay Teacher. So some of them are on there if you want them.
So the question was, do you edit them or do you use them as downloaded? Because I guess on TPT it didn't say whether or not they are editable, if that's a word.
So my bell ringers themselves are not editable right now. I keep getting that question, so apparently I'm going to have to make an editable version.
Yeah.
But they're not editable right now, and I do have 3 9-weeks worth of bell ringers up there right now. So there's lots up there.
Okay. So I'm just jotting down a couple more questions just before they disappear from the chat. Next question was, how do you introduce students to HyperDocs? Did you do it while you still had them live and in person? And if so, how would you recommend getting teachers to introduce them to students when they don't get to see them in person?
Right. So I can actually show you what I created. So I created this how-to, I guess. Let me find it. Link to it down here somewhere, deep in the depths. Also, okay, there we go. So I created this Google Slides tips and tricks. Now, normally if I'm in person, especially like last year I was starting with the bell ringers. So the bell ringers were a great way for me to kind of start them on how to do things and what happens if they delete things or don't know how to do something, how to drag and drop, how to resize things, whatever it is. So for this, I can actually share this if anybody really wants it or if they want to make it their own. But since I was using those activity boards, I showed them how to use the activity board, how to click on it and click the slides. Same thing with that activity board, go back to activity board. What happens if the font's too small to read? So showing them that you can zoom in and out on Google Slides as well is helpful to them. So I just kind of how to use the text boxes, how to click and drag and drop, make copies of things, how to turn it in. So I made like kind of my own little slideshow, if that helps, to help them kind of navigate, especially because I am not there for them in person.
Lots of requests to share that tips and tricks.
Yeah, I can, if I add it to the one pager, will it update on the website?
It should. Yes, okay. It'll update for the one that I see, and then if I have a copy that's not the same, I can update the one that goes.
Okay. Yeah, so after this, I'll update it, and then yeah, Perfect. I'll put that link on there too.
Yeah, so that will be added to the one-page document for those of you who are requesting that. Terrific, thank you. So one of the questions was, do you create your activities in slides or docs? And I kind of responded to that saying what she's showing right now is all in slides, but you have also done it in docs as well.
Yeah, I've done it in docs, not as often. Google Docs or Microsoft Word, I feel like is constricting, where it doesn't let you move things wherever you want them because it wants to keep it like within the margins and, you know, in nice lines, and I don't like it. It's confining. So I like Google Slides. You can even make Google Slides. So you can make your Google Slides different sizes. So if you go to page file and then page setup, you can actually change it to custom, and you can make it like an 11.5 by, or 11 by 8.5, and change it if you want. That way it looks like a piece of paper. And it'll print that way too if you want. So just fun facts.
Terrific. How do you grade your book snaps was the next question.
Oh, book snaps. I think it was pretty lenient with them. They had to have there were certain stipulations, so there had to be like a reaction. There had to be um, their finding of tone or mood and kind of their explanation to that. Um, and I don't think I like required them to use their Bitmoji, but most of them did anyways. So just kind of two things. Wasn't super crazy. Um, I'm just trying to remember. It's been a minute, but I mean, you can kind of grade them however you want to. If you want, you could make a little baby rubric for them if
I
you
was
wanted
thinking that,
to.
yeah.
Yeah, however you want to do it.
Um, how do you create the instructions that you had on the side of the slide?
Okay, so I'm on my school computer, which is a Mac, which just makes it super easy to make screenshots of things. You hold down Command Shift and 4, Command Shift 4, and then you can take a screenshot of any part of your screen, just like any part that it gives you like a drag and drop tool, and you just make like your little square, whatever size you want it to be, and then it will save it to your desktop as a picture. So I'm trying to think, where did I put directions at?
For those of you, while she's looking for that, for those of you who are not Mac users, if you're on a Windows machine, there's the snipping tool, and that basically does the exact same thing. You just basically outline what you want to snip.
Yep.
And I believe that Chrome, if you're on a Chromebook, Chromebooks there's a Chrome
Yeah,
extension that you can get for that as well.
yeah, I was gonna say, I know there's one on Chromebooks because I used to have a Chromebook too. But yeah, so I would just like, this is just a text box that I typed, and then this was the picture that I snipped from my screen. And then I just make these red boxes around what I'm trying to highlight for them. It seems to be working well. Just kind of trying to, you have to like think through the directions and what you want them to do and all the steps that are there. But after you kind of figure that out, like I've done this Instagram slide, I think twice now in the past couple weeks. So I just copy and pasted these directions again. I'm not going to make them again. Same with the template. Like the template was already there. I just changed the background from green to pink to match the rest of my slideshow for that week, and I was off and changed the article.
You may have remembered Lauren saying early on, most of these activities don't work when you're in present mode. That might be something that you tell your students. Don't go into present mode if you're doing it in Google Slides, because you're not going to see those instructions that are off the slide if you're in
Exactly.
present
And,
mode. So,
yeah, and you can't type in present mode. You can't do any of that. We did have, I did have a couple students that tried to do that our first week, but we fixed that quickly.
Oh, good. So 3 more questions that were up here before we wrap up. First, somebody wanted to know, probably a Schoology user, if you've ever used Schoology as opposed to Google Classroom and how this integrates with that.
I have not. I've only been using Google Classroom, so I don't know.
You can push out, in Schoology, you can push out a copy of this to all students, but it would have to be in PowerPoint because you wouldn't be able to push out a separate copy to each kid.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that that's probably what the question was. Next question was, after creating your document, you clicked on Create. Where is that in Docs?
Wait, say that again?
After creating your document, I'm assuming creating the slide,
Yes.
you clicked on Create. And
in Google
Classroom? In Google Docs.
Oh, well, it had to be in Google Classroom, like in classwork, like how to upload it.
Okay.
Yeah. So you just click create, you would go to assignment, and then you would add via your Google Drive. See if one pops up here. So I can just use even the one I'm using today. And then this is where it says students can view files. So you want to change that to make a copy for each student. And then you would just continue on and post it, if that answers that question.
Yep. And then the last request was just to share that tips and tricks file, which will be on your linked up on that one pager. Yes. So people are asking, is there a link to the Google Tips slides? We're not going to share it in the chat here because we actually need to wrap up. We have another session that's coming into this same Zoom room in about 5 minutes. So we need to,
Yeah, I'll put that on the one pager, and I can even add it in this the presentation as well. So that way, when they click on any of
perfect.
those links, it'll work.
And I did link, if anybody didn't check or didn't see it, I did link the AIU's remote learning site in the chat. So if you just scroll up a little bit, it looks like it's about at 8:38 or 8:39, something like that. So, all right. Any last questions for Lauren?
I don't have a question for Lauren, but I do have a question about on those one pagers.
Yes.
When you pull them up, sometimes there's a link at the bottom, but when you try to go to it, a black box comes over top of it, so you can't really get to it, and it has other functions on it. Is there any way around that? Because I'm trying to kind of click the link, but it's underneath this toolbox, and so I can never get to the link that's at the bottom of the page.
That I am not familiar with. Interesting. I think Janet and Tyler are both on the chat. If you guys are familiar with what's going on, maybe we can work on, working that out. I know that we've gotten some feedback that sometimes the links are not properly shared. That would be something you'd have to reach out to the presenter for their sharing settings.
Yeah, this is just, I can't even get to the bottom of the page link because it's covered up. As soon as you move your mouse, it pops up and you can't get around it anyway to get to the link at the bottom. And sometimes it might be an email or it's actual link to maybe a slideshow.
I know what she's talking about, Heather, because that's
Okay.
happened to me.
All right, we'll look into that today and hopefully we can troubleshoot that. So thank you for sharing that. Thanks for giving us that feedback. We appreciate it. Okay, I think this is that pretty much wraps it up. So thank you, Lauren. Thanks to all of you for attending first thing this morning. And we hope that you guys will join we still have several sessions going on every day for the rest of this week. So thank you once again. And I will go ahead and end our session in 3, 2, 1. Thank you.
Thanks.